Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside The Fall of Tobruk, Rommel's Greatest Victory. This is a game designed by Chris Fawcett and is published by Compass Games. Well, I just got this one in and I wanted to share a look inside with you. This is a completely new game, not to be confused with Frank Chadwick's game from many years ago back in the 70s, but this game itself is its own animal. So it'll be interesting to see what Chris's take is on this campaign. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game is all about. The Fall of Tobruk, Rommel's Greatest Victory, is a recreation of the Axis attack on the heavily fortified Gazala Bir Hakim line in May to June of 1942. Participating in the attack were 3 corps of Italian troops and the vaunted Deutsche Afrika Corps, all under the operational command of General Erwin Rommel. Opposing the Axis forces were 2 corps of the 8th Army, manned by a polyglot allied force of British, South African, and Indian troops, along with a force of Free French troops, all under the command of General Neil Ritchie. The battle was pivotal in the Western Desert campaigns that had seesawed back and forth across Cyrenaica since the winter of 1940. The battle has been described as Rommel's greatest victory, leading to the Axis capture of Tobruk, the British abandonment of Libya, and the subsequent retreat to El Alamein. Players represent the 2 army commanders Rommel and Ritchie, maneuvering the various brigades and regiments under their command in order to control the vital port of Tobruk and defeat the enemy forces while still preserving their own army as a force in being. And at the top we have an example of the map and the counters. Components, we get 5 counter sheets, 2 map sheets, 1 Allied air display, 1 Axis air display, 1 Allied reserve and refit display, 1 Axis reserve and refit display, an air reinforcement and withdrawal table, ground reinforcements chart, air tasking display screen, basic game air tables card, order of battle display, 2 player aid cards, and a 36-page rulebook. It is rated as complexity 7 out of 10, time scale is 1 day per turn, map scale is 1.5 miles per hex, unit scale, battalions and companies, it is for 2 players, solitaire suitability is 8 out of 10, and the average playtime is 8 to 10 hours. It is recommended for ages 14 and up. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. All right, we got our 2 dice, a sheet of clarifications, rulebook, shrink-wrapped counter sheets, a whole bunch of player aid cards, and our maps. These are nice, thick maps, feel like cardstock maps, nice and thick. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with the game. There are 2 separate maps. You slightly overlay one on top of the other, and as I said, these are nice, thick cardstock maps, so they're going to take a lot more abuse than your standard paper map will, so love seeing a Compass doing that with these. That's fantastic. You've got Gazala at the top left, Tobruk at the top right. You've got the very top there is the Mediterranean Sea. Sprinkled throughout, you've got a pretty interesting palette of terrain features, something that we don't see in a lot of desert games where it looks really good. This one looks fantastic. At the top, you just have that clear, that's that light terrain. Throughout the rest, you've got sand. We've got some hummocks. We've got rough all along the bottom. We've got paved roads at the top. Sprinkled throughout the rest of the map, we've got unpaved roads. Minefields here, wadis, these are the darker lines throughout the map, and at the top right you get that big area there, those are tank traps. Also along the middle you've got this blue dashed line, that is the air sector boundary. At the top right we have the weather table, along the right hand side we have the turn track, and on the left hand side we have the terrain legend. Overall, a very beautiful map, outstanding, nice thick cardstock, great job by Compass Games. Next, we'll take a look at the player aids, and there are a bunch, so we're going to try to move through these pretty quickly. Start off with the player aid 1. This gives us the integrated combat results table at the top, fire combat resolution on the bottom left. In the middle, we have the close combat resolution, and on the right-hand side, we have the close combat resolution engaged. At the bottom right, we have the various modifiers that can be applied in each of these situations. On the back, we have the terrain effects chart, command control table, ZOC summary chart, artillery range chart, stacking density chart, minefield attack table, and the morale checks table. On the next sheet, we have the basic air tables, giving us the airfield DRM, air mission result, headquarters DRM, and the sector superiority table. On the next sheet, we have the expanded sequence of play, giving us the different phases in the game: dawn phase, AM phase, PM phase, and the dusk phase. On the next sheet, we have the air display screen, and you're going to see the same table on both sides. That's because this is intended to be folded and then cut to create an individual screen for each player. Then we have the Allied Reserve and Refit sheet. At the top, we have the Reserve tank track. Bottom left are rack holding boxes. Then the Allied and Italian tank repair, units to be refit, and refitting units on the right-hand side. And at the bottom right, we have the units permanently eliminated. On the next sheet, we have the same thing for the Axis forces. Then we have the air and ground unit reinforcement charts for the Axis, the Allied Order of Battle for the 8th Army, and the Allied Order of Appearance on the right-hand side. On the next sheet, we have the Allied Air Order of Battle and the Axis Air Order of Battle. On the next sheet, we have the Allied Order of Battle for the 8th Army 1. The other one that we saw before was for 8th Army 2. Next, we have a graphical representation for the Allied setup for the May 26th, 27th scenarios. On the next sheet, we have the Axis Order of Battle for the Panzer Army Africa and Deutsche Afrika Korps. On the right-hand side, we have the Axis Order of Appearance. Next, we have the Axis Order of Battle for the Armata Africa Settentrionale. Then we have a graphical representation of the Axis setup for the May 26th scenario. And we have the same for the May 27th scenario. And on the last two sheets, we have the Allied Air and the Axis Air displays. Next, we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game, and they are shrink wrapped for a reason. So when you take them out of the shrink wrap, be careful, because as Compass games tend to do, they will fall right out of the tree. So just be careful when you take them out of the shrink. On the first sheet here, we have the Allied forces. On the next sheet, we have Axis forces. Those continue on to the third sheet, as well as some administrative counters at the bottom right. And on the last two counter sheets are the remainder of the administrative counters for use in the game. And lastly, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 32-page full-color rulebook. Inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents listing out all the different rule sections and their associated page numbers. Start off with the introduction, the components, listing out all the components that come with the game, and then we get to the sequence of play, which is going to break down all the different phases: your dawn phase, AM phase, PM phase, and the dusk phase. And it's going to give you all the steps underneath each. And that's where it picks up here on page 3 with the dawn phase, reinforcement replacement phase, AM phase, weather determination, air planning phase, operations phase, and then right here we have a call-out rule. It says cardinal rule number 1. These impulses can be performed in any order per activation, but only one of each impulse type can be performed at a time. Unlike most other war games, all movement conducted by a player does not have to take place before combat. So that's something to really keep in mind, as it says here, cardinal rule number 1. Artillery impulse, air impulse, movement impulse, combat impulse, and then we have cardinal rule number 2. One unit's movement could not be interrupted to perform an air support mission, then resume movement and be interrupted again to perform an artillery bombardment. Have combat and then continue movement. So another cardinal rule to keep in mind. Then we have the cleanup phase, PM phase, repeat the AM phases, and then we have dusk phase, which is your air base repair phase, and then the game turn record phase. So you're going to be moving on to the next turn. General gain concepts, we have the zones of control, terrain and zones of control, movement and ZOCs, combat and ZOCs, supply and ZOCs, and then stacking, as well as your stacking limit explanation there. An exception call out here, illustrated example on the right-hand side. Then we have the overstacking penalties example, giving us an illustrated example of that. Towed and SP guns, weather determination, haze weather, Kamsin weather effects, clear weather effects, reinforcements and replacements, refit destroy units, tank wrecks and repairs, reserve tanks, consolidating air unit losses. Then we get to the air game under air planning, air displays, air unit basing, airfield control and air unit basing, exceeding airbase capacity, assigning air units to missions, weather and air planning, solitaire, and basic game air planning. So there's a breakdown here for your solitaire and your basic games. There's going to be a basic and advanced, apparently, but it's got basic in here. Formations, headquarters, and activations. Get to artillery, bombardment procedures. Another example here. Air mission, a breakdown of your air missions, your fighter missions, fighter sweeps, defensive patrols, escorts, bombing missions, combat support, strafing bombing, transfer, and then air mission procedures. Your mission contact table, resolving air-to-air combat, applying your air damage, and again, we have solitaire and basic game air missions, which are optional rules here. Then we get to movement, general movement, movement and minimum moves, combat, anti-tank fire segment, anti-tank fire procedures, regular combat segment, reconnaissance, retreat before combat, and then we have a breakdown of the combat results, morale checks, disruption, how to become disrupted, effects of disruption, removing disruption, minefields in boxes, supply, effects of being out of supply, and then the victory conditions on page 22. How to win, allied withdrawals, triggering the allied withdrawal, axis losses, and then we get to setting up the game on page 22. So it's kind of a little different. We have the setup at the back right after victory conditions, and it only goes up to page 22 for that. So not a tremendous amount of rules when it comes to a 32-page rule book, being that the setup and all starts at 22. Then we have the May 27th scenario, special scenario rules. Then we have the Appendix A unit abbreviations on page 24. Allied setup notes. Appendix B is your detailed component description, which is going to give you a breakdown of all your counters, how to read those, different types of ground units, air units, formations, all your admin counters, how to use those, your air displays, reserve and refit displays, turn record charts, and the player aid cards, dice, and your rule book. And then on the back of the rules, we have the appendix. And that is a look at everything you get inside of The Fall of Tobruk, Rommel's Greatest Victory. This is a game designed by Chris Fawcett and is published by Compass Games. Well, first things first, is a fantastic quality production. Love this map, nice thick cardstock, and beautiful art on it, which it's really easy to mess up with Desert because Desert can be pretty blah. They didn't. They made it have a lot of character on top of having all of the right terrain features that you'll need for the game, and very easy to distinguish what each of them are. Plus, we have all these great player aids. You've got informational ones. You've got tracks, everything you could need for the game. Outstanding counters, just a fantastic quality production. About 20 pages of rules, so not going to be a deep game to get into as far as needing to learn a lot of rules, but it looks like there's a lot of options there, a lot of depth, a lot of layers to work through, which I think is really, really cool. So I'm interested to see what Chris's take is on The Fall of Tobruk here and get this on the table and check it out. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.